My Gavanan Melanin, and well met indeed. I am Arakir Galadirthan, the head and lead modder of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome to a video that has essentially been a year and 4 months in the making, as I look to now update all of the faction overview videos that you can find on my channel, which relate to each of the factions in Divide and Conquer. I'll talk a little bit about the videos themselves, and then we'll dive on with Gondor being the first one, but you won't have this spiel in any of the others. So, as I say, it's been a year and 4 months since I did a Gondor overview video, or the Gondor overview video, and in that time we have gone through version 0.52, version 1, version 1.01, version 1.1, and about the time that this video is on, version 1.2. So many changes have come that even though some factions are very changed in very small ways, I still just want to do a complete refresh of them all. So I'm going to, basically, and it's going to fill a slot of my little weekly 5-video rota, and you'll figure that out soon enough for yourselves. Of course, if it's now a year down the line and you're watching this, do take note of the date of this video. Some things might be different, and I shall say that at the beginning of every video. So there might be 1 or 2 things when you come to play the game that are different to this video, because the mod is continually growing and progressing. But part of the reason why I'm now updating these is for that very reason. So much is now different that I feel like it's worth doing new videos. There will be 2 major changes from the last faction overview videos to these ones. And then there's a third point to talk about. The first major change is that I am going to turn on the Fog of War for every video. In the original ones, I never turned the Fog of War on because I didn't want to spoil anything. I didn't want to ruin what was around you. I didn't want you to know where things were. But I feel like it was a massive waste of time. Everyone knows how to toggle Fog of War. Everyone knows how to cheat. No one particularly... There's no real bad thoughts towards you if you do cheat. It's a single-player game. If you want to get some units in that you can't play normally until you've played for like 10 hours, then do it. Go for it. I'm not bothered. So many of you will know everything about it anyway, and many of you will know the map anyway because it's Lord of the Rings. So I'm going to toggle Fog of War. Number 2, when we do the battle half of the video, I am not going to go into detailed talk about the stats of the units. I'm merely going to just show you the units. Which ones come before the barracks event, which one comes after, and which ones are your top tier. I'll talk a little bit about AOR units, the area of recruitment style units, and I'll break them down into your archers, your foot, and your cavalry. But I'm not going to go through the stats of every single unit, because I just don't think it matters. You can check the stats in individual battles, and that's when it's more likely to matter. Your 2 units are fighting against each other. You want to know if your unit has got the drop on the unit it's attacking. But having a general overview of the entire roster, it's just not really worth it with the stats. So this time you'll just get a brief overview of the roster rather than a full in-depth stat-by-stat analysis. Now, if there's some things about the unit which you can't find out from the scrolls, I will tell you about them. So I will at least talk about every single unit and give you their name, but I'm just not going to go through their stats in detail. So those are the major changes. I also wanted to update this because 1 year and 4 months ago, when I last did these overview videos, I was using worse software, a worse microphone, everything about it was worse. I still had habits that I've since kicked, like the kissing of my teeth, as some people called it, and the constant inhaling, and just little noises here and there that no longer affect it. So I think all round it's worthwhile updating. So, let's begin. I'm going to do them in the order that they already exist, so that the first one goes first, which is Gondor, and the last one, which I think was Khazad-dûm, will go last. Because Khazad-dûm, it hasn't changed very much at all. Obviously, that video is only a few months old. But anyway, we'll start with Gondor. So, Gondor. I've got a little line here on my book of what I'm going to talk about in every single episode, so there's uniformity. And we're going to start with the size of your kingdom. So it's always recommended to play very hard as well. If you're playing the mod at the beginning when you're choosing your faction, there's a selection option for difficulty. We always recommend very hard, because that is what we balance the game for. So there's that first of all. Apologies, hit the microphone. Right, so Gondor. Gondor, as you can see from the map of the white and black area, have a very large starting domain. Going all the way, of course, from the Ered Luthuli, the Ash Mountains, all the way west through the heartlands of Gondor, right down to Anulond. Anulond being your western tip. So you've got quite a large starting domain, which in turn means that as Gondor you can get quite a large starting army. Particularly if you pull all of the units that you've got in Henethanoon, Caer Andros, the two Osgiliaths, Minas Tirith and Calenhad, and to some extent even Karasast maybe, and Pelagia perchance, you will find that you've got quite a sizable starting army that you can muster within the first few turns. And as I say, Gondor, I believe, actually, have the largest starting domain of any nation in terms of the number of regions that you control. You control more than anyone else. Now, in terms of actual size, it's debatable. The Easterlings of Rhûn may well be larger, but Gondor have got the most regions under their control at game start. So, it's quite a nice one to kick off with. Now, your first things first, where are you going to be looking to invade at the very beginning if you don't want to attack your neighbours? Well, in terms of Rebel expansion, of course, you've got the entire southern side. So, Tirith is open for you. Tirith Ride, if you get that far across. Ostithil, there's Rebel provinces there. They're all available. You can try and beat Mordor to Gelebrin, but it's going to be a bit of a challenge. But you've also got the Rebel castle of Cirith Yor, and you've got the Rebel castle of Tharagrundost. Both of which are, of course, as I say, Rebel, and you can get them before Enedwaith or Isengard do. So there's quite a lot of options at the very beginning of where you might want to advance into, or expand into. Now, your neighbours that aren't Rebel are very self-explanatory. Gondor are arguably the most popular race to play in the game, or the most popular nation, but I'll go through them anyway. To the east, of course, you have Mordor. Here is Mordor. Mordor are your chiefest and greatest enemy, or your chief enemy, and also they happen to be your greatest enemy. To the north, although the border with them by as the crow flies is nothing, the border as the human walks is actually quite lengthy. You've got to go from Calenhad, and you only border them with one region. But as I say, the entire mountain acts as a border, but there's Rohan. Rohan are just to your north, and they're staunch allies. Of course, Mordor, you start the game as enemies. I'll go through the diplomacy in a moment. Slightly further north than Rohan, but someone you will have to factor into your eventual expansion, possibly, is Isengard. They may well reach you at the gap here, the Pukal Gap, the Druaith Eor. Also to the north, but slightly to the west, are the forces of Enedwaith. Enedwaith are a total wildcard at the beginning. They might attack you, they're just as likely to ally with you. It's entirely depending on what you essentially want to do. You can attack them and then beat them into submission and force them to take an alliance with you, or at least a ceasefire. But at game start, they're neutral. Likewise, Isengard are not your enemy at game start, they are neutral. To the south, your strongest ally is Dol Amroth. Now, arguably, Rohan might be your strongest ally, but in terms of raw unit strength on a one-for-one basis, Dol Amroth are arguably the best human faction in the game. Close, like it's between them and the Northern Dunedain. So, Dol Amroth are unfortunately better than you, but you've got more size, more money, and you kind of get more. They have better, you get more. That's how the distinction between the two. But they're your allies just to the south, and they will go every single game. They will cross the Aether Anduin, the mouths of the Anduin, and they will try and push into Horondor, which is this vast area here. Of course, eventually you will also have to deal with the clans in the south. You've got the Haradrim down here, in their capital of Finabel, but they will push north. I believe they get Barad-Han in the Turn 1 auto expansion. Watch the Harad video to learn that one. And you will definitely have to deal with the Variags of Khand. Khand get Imlad Khanan in the Turn 1 auto, so they will be rushing for Tirith Ride quite quickly. Now you start at war with Harad and Mordor and Khand and Umbar, as you can see just along there, but you don't start at war with Rhûn, Enedwaith, Dunland or Isengard. So to the north you're fairly safe, to the south and east there's warfare constantly. And your only allies, as I say, are the Principality of Dol Amroth and the Kingdom of Rohan. So that's your neighbours, that's your Rebel expansion. So what about your economy? Well, Gondor have one of the best human economies that the game's got. There's no two ways about it. You've got quite a lot of mines that you can plunder, as it were, along the borders of the White Mountains. The Ered Nimreis. You've also got a lot of ports. Ports are a big, big moneymaker, and the Gondor can use them to their full advantage. And you also get the benefit of no real construction restrictions. So you can build the largest town, which is a large city, and you can build the largest castle, which is a castle. There are 3 tiers of castle: Motte and Bailey, Wooden Castle, and Castle. You can build all 3. And there are 5 tiers of a town: a village, a town, a large town, a city, and a large city. And you can build all 5. Of course, the village and the Motte and Bailey no one ever builds. They are the lowest level. But Gondor have no restrictions there, which gives you long-term economical bonuses and boosts and potential, I suppose is the word. So leading on to that, construction-wise, Gondor have no construction restrictions. You can build everything and anything. Particular buildings to note are in Minas Tirith itself. There is a building called the Fiefdom Barracks. This is very, very important. This allows you to train all of the fiefdom units of Gondor in one location, outside of their fiefs. So as you saw there, you get Pinnath Cavalry, who come from the farthest west, Blackroot Vale, who come from the central, Lossarnac, who are only 1 turn away, so it's not too bad. But it's also worth noting in the Fiefdom Barracks that the units will replenish depending on how far away they come. So you can train more Lossarnac Axemen over a 20 turn period, for example, for argument's sake, than you would be able to train Pinnath Cavalry. Because the cavalry are coming from further away, the replenishment is therefore longer. But the Fiefdom Barracks is a very important building. Additionally, in Tarnost, there's another building called the Amrothian Barracks, and this allows you to train Dol Amroth units, which allows you to inject some strong cavalry into your army, which is something you miss, as we'll see in the second half of the video. Gondor as well, because as I say, there's no construction restrictions, you are one of the few nations that get highways or great roads. And I don't think they're pre-built anywhere, save for possibly Bree. I think Bree was the only place I pre-built them. Yes, yeah. So, but anyway, you can build them. So you get great roads, which is a huge advantage, both economically and campaign-wise, because it allows your troops to move further. Now, in terms of scripts for Gondor, what scripts can you expect? Well, I'm afraid there are none. Gondor is a nation with no scripts. Now, there's scripts that will affect you, but they're not scripts that you have any say in or control over, and that is, of course, the Umbar invasion script. So whilst there are no scripts that you can directly control as Gondor, there is a script that will affect you. And of course, if you're unsure what I mean by scripts, these are just scripted events that can happen throughout the game if certain triggers or certain requirements are met. And the Umbar invasion, as long as Umbar control Umbar, as long as the nation of Umbar controls the city of Umbar, then you are at threat constantly from raids on your coastal towns. So this runs all the way from Tharagrondos through Anulond, Londgallen, Etheland, down to Linhir, should you get that, Fanwilond, Pelagia, and that's it. But also Methrast and Dol Amroth, but obviously you are very unlikely to get either of those. But and the Umbar invasion is just, there's a random % chance that a small army from Umbar will land and will try and take those cities. So you've got to be on your guard on the borders of the sea. But that's the only script that really plays any part on Gondor. A sort of it's something that used to be a script, so I like to talk about it, and that is the Palantir. The Palantir is now just a standard building that gives you a bonus, and that is it. So there's no script related to that anymore. And also, if we're talking, we'll also talk about, because I'm trying to make these videos have as much new information as they can to stand out from the ones I did before. So the way that Gondor trains their diplomat is from the Tower of Icthelion. You can get 2 diplomats from the Tower of Icthelion, and if you want any more, you're going to have to capture the capital cities of those around you. But your diplomats come from Minas Tirith. Right, so the final point to talk about on the campaign side is, are there any tips that I could give you about playing as Gondor? Well, there is one. Bear with me. Just having a drink. The number one way to make the Gondor campaign go from potentially difficult to incredibly easy is to attack Mordor straight away. So, obviously Mordor borders you, So you're at war with them straight away, and you already share a border. So they're going to be pumping out units and throwing them at you non-stop. You don't have to worry just yet about Harad or Khand, because both of them have either got to... Khand has got to come all the way up to Osgiliath, which is quite a jaunt for them. And Harad, in the early game, Dol Amroth and Harad go back and forth, and they kind of keep each other at bay. So Mordor in the early game, unless Ened Wyth attack you, are the only real threat that you've got. So there's a very easy way to basically shut the campaign down and have quite a leisurely campaign, and that is to attack Mordor straight away. So as I said at the very beginning, Gondor have the potential to muster quite a large army at turn 1. Well, if you muster said army from Minas Tirith, from the Osgiliaths, Cair-Andros, Henothan and Calenhad, Carasast, potentially Pelargir, you've got a sizable force that you can already besiege Minas Morgul. Once you besiege Minas Morgul, if you can then take it, you've then bottlenecked Mordor straight away. They've either got to come all the way around the north, which the AI doesn't want to do, because the AI always tries to find the fastest route to you, and going through the Black Gate makes it it factors into their thinking, so they end up just trying to come at you through Minas Morgul, and they send only dribs and drabs around the gate. So it helps you out immensely. So it's something I heartily recommend, is to crush, or at least take Minas Morgul straight away. If you have to take it, destroy all the buildings and move away, but I can't understand why you wouldn't want to hold it. Also, Minas Morgul allows you to train one of your best units, the I can't remember what I called them, Minas Ithil Guardians. I believe that's their name, we'll see in the second half. And they come from Minas Morgul only, so it's quite a useful place to take. But that's really the only tip there is. Another kind of tip is, if you are struggling, try and get an alliance with Ened Wyth, because that totally shuts down any threat from the west, and the east is then totally open to you, and you can do whatever you want, essentially. You are free to attack whoever and whenever you will, if you're not having to worry about the west, because the west is a lot harder to defend. Ened Wyth can't hold a candle to you if you play as Gondor. Their troops, one for one, their troops are abysmal in comparison to yours at any stage of the game. But they get the benefit of being right in their heartlands, and you, unfortunately, are scrabbling to get troops through Pinnith Gelin and Anfalas, whereas your main core recruitment centres are Minas Tirith, Carasast to an extent, and normally Cair-Andros. Those are kind of your big three. Oh, Heneth and Noon as well, actually. But the moral of the story is that over in the west, you don't really have anywhere that can muster troops very quickly, and they're all your earliest available troops. So it's quite hard to hold the west if Ened Wyth really get the idea in their head that they want it. So if you're struggling, try and get peace with them. But that concludes the campaign side of the Gondor map. There's not too much to talk about. There's not too much different. If I then end each one of these actually with raw differences between 0.5 to now, with the actual campaign map, then there's only a few things that are completely different from the last video to this one. Those are all terrain changes, so I'll cover these. I'll add that as a little thing, and I'll cover these last. So the terrain changes from the last video that I did of this to this video. Cair-Andros is no longer surrounded by ocean. Now, I know that this looks like a river, but the game, it's actually considered ocean by the game. So the buggy map that used to exist there, where that stone bridge now resides, that's gone. So there's a lot fewer problems around the Cair-Andros area when you're defending it. So that's one of the key changes. Secondly, you can now sail a ship all the way from Harlond, which interestingly is the name of the southern side of Mithlond, but it's also the name of the port to the south of Minas Tirith, because it literally means South Haven. But the port of Harlond, which is this one just here, you can sail from there all the way to the sea, because I opened up the port next to Ostithil. So you can now sail past that. Additionally, as well, when 1.2 comes out, which is only a couple of weeks away from this video, and even now, actually, except that they haven't got new CSMs yet, the forts that you see just here will be unique Gondorian battle maps. So if you do get a chance to fight in them, they'll be Gondorian. And when you get all to play 1.2 as well, you'll see that these have Gondorian-inspired looks to them. But other than that, it's nothing too different. There's a few forts that didn't exist before in 0.5 that are dotted here and there. For example, the two guarding the Pukul Gap. But otherwise, there's very few changes to the Gondorian terrain. But that concludes the campaign map, so bear with me one moment. There'll be a jarring second in a second, and then it'll be the battle map. Welcome to the battle map side. Right, before we dive in, I just want to explain a few things. What I will do on the battle map for every nation is, in the center here is the train everywhere roster. So this is your core roster that you could, if you're playing as Gondor, for example, if you were to conquer, I don't know, Fornost, if you were to conquer Mistrand in Rune, if you were to take Erebor, if you took Umbar, any of those locations, if you took a nameless Orc city in Dol Guldur, Dor Lingvar, for example, not nameless, I suppose, then this is the roster that you will train. And then just to the left-hand side of that, this will be the same for every nation. This is the selection of units that come from a specific location. These are AOR units, Area of Recruitment. And this, I don't know why Area of Recruitment, because it doesn't really work. But anyway, these units are available in only a few locations. But the payoff is that these are normally better for the tier level that they align to than the standard unit. Which leads me on to the tier levels. The very front line are your pre-barracks event absolute militia level. One after that are those that still come before the barracks event. That's what this gap here represents. This is the barracks event. But the second tier is units that come before the barracks event, but are still, but you could not possibly conceivably call them militia. They are at least mainline troops, but they just come before the barracks event. And then you've got your standard after the barracks event units, and then you've got your elites after that. Sometimes there'll then be an extra level, and we call these Uber elites, thanks to the German. Uber, I'm assuming, I think it's German anyway. But anyway, we call them Uber elites colloquially when we talk about them in the game. And these are 1 or 2 units dotted around the game world who are just out of this world. Examples are Mithlon Nobles, Smiths of Eregion, Sons of the Fallen for dwarves. I'm going to just go out there and tell you that almost all Uber units are dwarven or elven, I'm afraid. Humans don't really have them. But that's what the next tier would be reserved for, if we had any. And then finally, the General's Bodyguard is always up here on his own. Now, disclaimer with Gondor as well. Their roster's so big that I can't fit every single unit onto one team. So I've had to bring in Dol Amroth and use the units that we share over with them. So Dol Amroth are taking some of the burden and have a few units over there. So they won't be in their proper low places, but I just bunged them in anyway. So that's how every single battle map side is going to go. And I'm just going to talk through the units, give you a brief overview. I will click on their image, but I won't go through the stats one by one explaining them all. And as I say, I will only talk about units that have an especially interesting stat. So, let's dive in. Your main lines is Gondor. The first 2 units that you're going to be getting are the right here, the Gondor Militia. Those are the Gondor Militia. Nothing particularly amazing about them. Average, average, average. And your Territorial Guardsmen, who are just to the left. Essentially, one of these is an aggressive militia, one of them is a defensive militia, as you can see from their stats. Quite nicely, one is more defensive and one is more aggressive. Nothing else to talk about those. However, in the early game, completing your standard 4, as we like to think of it. We don't like to think of it, but it just so happens almost every nation has this setup. But you also then have Archer Militia, who again aren't going to win any awards, but as militia go, they're very, very good. It's very worthwhile noting that Gondor are kind of used as the default faction. So almost every single faction in the game has been balanced based on what Gondor's stats were. So they hold quite an important point in the game. So when we say militia, this is what we consider to be militia, the Gondorian style stats. Which is why orcs have kind of a sub-level militia, because their stats are just so downright abysmal. But Gondor are very much the foundation faction. So just to bear that in mind for the future of all these 1.2 update videos. But rounding out your early 4 are Gondor Cavalry Militia. And again, there's their stats there. Again, nothing really to shout about. Along with the Archer Militia, nothing really amazing. Feel free to pause at these if you do wish to learn a little bit about them if you want to. I'll just talk about these very briefly because this is the first video. But it will tell you all of their abilities here. See morale below literally means look down here and read their morale off. Some people get confused with that. So their morale is average. Every single unit in the game has a morale category and has a morale response category. The morale is a single number and it's affected by changes which the game calls morale response. And again, their morale response is considered average. And this is their ability to shake off negative morale effects, such as being flanked, being surrounded, the general being killed, other units nearby routing. All of those things will affect their morale, but if their morale response is above average, then it won't affect them very much. And that's what that means. Their armor class is just so that you can at a glance see what everyone's like, although there is a separate armor stat there. And then they fight better if you fight in grassland. They fight worse when you're fighting in the desert or the snow. And that actually does have a big impact. If you go to Umbar and you knock on their door, they're going to get bonuses in desert and you're going to get universal negatives. So your whole army is worse when fighting in the desert. And finally, because they're spearmen, they get a bonus against any camels, any wargs, and any horses. And those are all detailed there. Every single unit has those. To look at an archer's one as well, just before we carry on. The archers one also tells you how many missiles they have. If no one in that unit dies, every single man will fire 18 arrows. Their range is 150 meters, but their accuracy is low. That's all self-explanatory. So those are the stats there. And as I say, for Gondor, that's your big four. So almost every nation has one aggressive militia, one defensive militia, one archer, and one cav militia. And Gondor are no exception. So we'll group those off over there into their own thing. Now, before the barracks event and in this second tier, I'll do the core units before we cover the AOR units. But in this second tier come the Peacekeepers. Now, the Peacekeepers are very, very good in the early game. They give Gondor some much-needed punch. And there's their stats there. And if we scroll down, there's their advantages there. Now, a hidden stat for the Peacekeepers is that they are very, very quick. They run faster than almost any other ground unit, including some elves. They're just really, really fast, and you can use that to your advantage in certain situations. But after the barracks event, the first units you're going to be getting are the Gondor Spearmen and Gondor Infantry. Now, complete like their early tier where they've got the big four, they also have the big four after the barracks event as well. One aggressive, one defensive, one archer, and one cavalry. So if we start with the archer, this is the Gondor Archer. There's their stats there. You can compare those with the earlier ones if you wish, or you can do these in your own custom battles. But the Gondor archers are quite good. They're by nowhere near the best archers in the game, but they are dependable archers. All of Gondor's units are dependable, which is why their campaign is quite easy. Because they're a mainline infantry style archer unit, they can use stakes as well, and there's their secondary stats there. If we move along to our spearmen, the Gondor spearmen, again, as I say, very dependable, but there's nothing particularly stand out about them. They're just dependable units. They can make a shield wall, which is useful, and as usual, there's their stats there. Every spear unit and every pike unit gets a default bonus against horses, camels, wargs, but not oliphants or elephants, either one of those things. The Gondor infantry, again, as I say, just a more aggressive version of the spearmen, but slightly less defensive. That's the only difference between those two. And there's the infantry stats, and the lower one's just down there. And finally, the cavalry. Now, this is what I was saying about how Gondor do not have cavalry. They're not a cavalry nation. They're very much an infantry and archer civilization, if we were to give them Age of Empires style categorization. But you do at least get cavalry. It's just not very good. So there's your cavalry. Defense 13, attack 6, charge 11. I mean, it's not amazing. When you consider that elites, as you'll see as we go through, you'll get a bit more of a feel about the stats. And there's their areas just there. Now, if you're wondering why I'm blitzing through this as well, because Gondor have had virtually no changes since the last video, which is linked in the description. So for a more detailed look, you can always go back and look at that one, look at the battle map of that one, and you get this blow by blow of the stats. The battle map changes are only going to be prevalent for a few nations, but I still wanted to tag them on the end anyway, so you can all get a look at the units. And it's all in one nice place. Now, the only elite unit that is available everywhere for Gondor is the Citadel Guard. These units are after the barracks event, yes, but they're not your elites. The elites are the Citadel Guard, and that's their stats. So in comparison to, say, the Spearmen, which is their nearest relative, they've got an 8 defense higher, and they've got a 3 more attack and 3 more charge. Overall, they're just much better. And they're available everywhere, as I say. And then finally, this is a standard general's bodyguard for Gondor. 16 men on a horse, normally 17 with your general. And this is what they look like. They're pretty good. They are pretty cool. The low numbers is so that you can't spam cavalry early game and just defeat everyone with generals. But as you can see, their stats are very, very good. They're even skilled against other mounts, which gives them a little bit of an advantage against Harad and indeed the Nazgul. So there's your bodyguard. Now, if we move over to their AOR, As I say again, not a cavalry nation, as you can see by just glancing at that. The Pineth cavalry do add a huge bonus to you in the early game, but they're the only other cav unit that you get. They're really low on cav. 3 cav units when they've got this many troops. It's just outrageous. But the troops that you can get in the early game from other locations. Number 1, Ithilien Rangers. Very, very good archers. Rangers are the best archers for any nation. So if you've got an archer unit called something Rangers, 9 times out of 10 it's your best archer unit. This is true for the elves, this is true for the humans, this is even true for orcs if they get Rangers. Which I don't think any of them do actually, but Umbar do. Oh, Dol Guldur get Rangers. But Rangers are just the best archers, really. Use sharpened stakes, they've got a high missile damage, they get very, very good range, they get a lot of arrows, and they get high accuracy. Ithilien Rangers are only available in Ithilien, which is Ost-Ithil, Tir Thraed, Henethanoon, and Eastern Osgiliath. Also, you get, filling this level of the archery slot, are the Blackroot Vale archers for Gondor. Again, reasonably good stats, slightly better as you would expect than your militia archers, because they're available in the same time period, but not as good as the Rangers, who are always available early. Rangers don't really conform, because we wanted them to be different. But there's Blackroot Vale. They come from the Blackroot Vale, which is central Gondor. I believe they come from, I want to say Kalembel and Erek, and the one just south of Erek. I can't remember its name. Ah, my bad. But central Gondor anyway. Filling in this early tier as well are the Lamadan Clansmen. Now this unit is brand new. You won't see this in the other video. These are in play on the Peacekeepers. So the Peacekeepers have a high attack for the early game, but not too good on the defense. And the Lamadan Clansmen are a take on them. So again, they're quite quick, they run fast, they have a high attack, high charge, but their defense isn't anything to scream about. When you consider that your standard militia have 10 total defense, the Peacekeepers having 12 and the Clansmen having 13 is nothing amazing. But they're still woefully unprepared in comparison to your post-barracks event units with 20 and 21. So the Clansmen are a strike or a strike unit. You use them to flank. You don't use them in prolonged melee. They get we call them shock infantry because they shock the enemy, often causing a rout. And if they don't cause a rout, they at least kill quite a lot in their initial charge. And the Pineth cavalry also come in the early. Now they're a bit of a half and half. These are also brand new. You won't have had these in 0.52. But the cavalry militia are 10 and 3, the Pineth Gelen are 15 and 7, but the Gondor Cav are 13 and 6. So whilst the Pineth Gelen cavalry do come in early, they are arguably your best cavalry unit, but they come from so far away. They may well be after the barracks event actually, which would be a failing on my part given that I am the head of the mod, the leader of the modding team, but oh well, that's by the by. But now we get into the better units in the later game. So you've gone past the barracks event now, these are the units that you're going to get after that. First up, Lasarnak Axemen, a very elite shock infantry. There's some of their abilities and there's their stats there. They are quite a solid shock infantry, but nothing hidden about them that I can tell you. Also, you have the Osgiliath veterans. Now, the Osgiliath veterans only come... Oh, sorry, Lasarnak Axemen come from Lasarnak, which is the castle of, I believe, Brethil and the town of Karasast. The Pineth Gelen cavalry only come from Pineth Gelen, which is Seralond. So very, very rare indeed. The Osgiliath veterans come from rebuilt Osgiliath. Or, no, just after the barracks event in Osgiliath. And they are really quite good archers. As you can see, their stats in terms of arrows are getting on for the same as the Rangers. But they do fall a little shy in terms of range and accuracy. But when they swap to their swords, they're formidable infantry. They're a really, really good unit, all-rounder, an excellent unit for Gondor when you get to the late game. Do try and train them. But then Gondor's real heavy hitters, of course, are the Fountain Guard and their sword counterpart, the Wardens of the White Tower. Both of which only come from Minas Tirith, and both of which are very, very late game, except through, because we like to make some units available straight away, despite the fact that they're really, really late game units. And the Fountain Guard are one of those. So you can train them from turn 1, but then it will be like 45 turns before you can train another unit of them. They're very slow replenishment. But the Fountain Guard are the only pike unit that Gondor get. They're the only pike unit of your whole army. You're a very spear and sword army. But the Fountain Guard give you some pikes, which are very, very useful. So there's the Fountain Guard stats. They inspire your troops, which is always a bonus, and there's their morale at the bottom. They can't run away. Their morale is locked. That means you have to order them to run away. They will never break. The Wardens of the White Tower are very similar, but they have swords instead of pikes, and they inspire nearby troops, and again, they can't run away either, and there's their stats. So very good late-game units. And finally, well, not finally, we've got the others to talk about, but these are the Osgiliath pikemen, the guards of Osgiliath. I've just said that they're the only pikemen, and then there's these guards right here. These are the only 2 pike units of Gondor. And the farmhand pikemen, when you consider them, but everyone gets farmhand pikemen, so we don't really consider them. But these are the guards of Osgiliath.
Yes, my lord.
And the guards of Osgiliath are very good pike units. Now, pike units' stats, when you glance at them, may not appear all that good, and that's because there is a hidden event where pikes keep the enemy at bay, and there's an animation kind of problem whereby it makes pikes almost invincible. So if you give their stats, if their stats were similar to, say, the Wardens of the White Tower, they would be outrageously good. So pikes always have lower stats than you might imagine, but they are still really quite good. But as you can see from the linking up there, the guards of Osgiliath aren't actually as good as your Fountain Guard. They're more just a little nod to say, well done, you've rebuilt Osgiliath. Here's another very, very useful pike unit. And that's exactly what they are. So there's your guards of Osgiliath. And then finally, if we nip over to Dol Amroth, these are a few units that I hadn't mentioned. Number 1 are Horondor mercenaries, who unfortunately I can't give you their stats. I might be able to in the Dol Amroth one. But these are only available in Horondor, which is the region south of Gondor. Look it up on a map. They're available there. They're a shock infantry unit available in the early game. So they're another counterpart along with the clansmen and the peacekeepers who can do that early aggression. You've also got the Minas Ithil Guardians, who are one of your best shield units. They're a better version of the Citadel Guard. They're only available in Minas Morgul, or Minas Ithil, or whatever you want to call it once you take it. But they are a very, very good late-game spear unit. You also get, in the early game, one of the best early-game Gondor units are the Lebanon Guardsmen. You'll notice that Lebanon Marines are no longer available for Gondor, because they were replaced with the clansmen. But the Lebanon Guardsmen still exist, and are an incredibly good unit. Very good in the early game. They are your only javelin unit as well. There's a point worth noting. The javelins are armor piercing, and which it does say in their little info box if that was available. And they're very, very defensive. They're an ultra defensive early game unit for Gondor, which is why they shine so much, because a lot of the early game for Gondor is about defending your land. Now, I've also put the Trebuchet in because Gondor and Dol Amroth are the only 2 nations in the entire game who can train and recruit and build trebuchets. You might think that the dwarves would be able to, but instead the dwarves just have unbelievably good catapults. But the Gondorians actually get trebuchets. And that is the Gondor roster. So, as I say, these videos have, of course, been covered before these units have all been covered before by the last videos that I did, the 0.5 ones. The units, sorry. So some factions will be completely new units, and I will spend a little bit more time talking about their units that are available.
The battle is very much in our favor. Victory will be ours.
Some nations have no changes really whatsoever, obviously Gondor being one of them. But I will just give you a general overview of the units that you get as Gondor. And here's our cavalry militia trying to take on some of the great beasts of Mordor. I noted our trebuchets did a little charge a moment ago. And there's an Orc host, a unit we'll talk about when we cover Mordor. They're a reasonably new one. Our Pinnith-Gellins are getting stuck in there. So if you've got any questions about any of the units, I think that's probably a better way to do it. If you do have questions about the units, pop them in the comments section and I will get around to answering them and I'll talk about them. But I just don't think the stats were particularly necessary, so I omitted that section. You can have a look at the stats and you can talk it through. If any unit has anything particularly of note to talk about, I will mention it. I will cover that. This time around, obviously, I haven't actually mentioned like which units have armor piercing or anything like that. But it does say I've given you the option to read this, and it tells you that they're effective against armor. So I'll highlight things like your best units, the javelin units, for example, if a unit is a one-off, and obviously talking about the AORs. But it's also been a year since the last one, so it's just nice to revisit DaC-specific topics. So do let me know what you think of this video if you've enjoyed this newer, updated version. Obviously, there's no real noise in the background, but I personally kind of like that. These videos are pure information download. There's not really entertainment necessarily value to these. You'd come to this if you wanted to play as Gondor. So there we are. Let me know what you think. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. I'll get around to answering them. But until we speak again, and until we continue with Dol Amroth, Navar Naden Pedimad Melonin, and farewell.